Hello, and welcome to our new video series, Coffee with Coco. And my name's Coco. Today, we're gonna teach you how to make a pour-over. Today, we're using an Ethiopian coffee that we have for sale online at whitehart.cafe. I'm drinking the Honduras natural process that we have directly sourced from farmers in Honduras, working with an importer out of North Carolina. The flavor profile is super fruity. It is a lighter roast, as you would find with most naturally processed coffees. There are several key factors in making a pour over that are incredibly important and are non-negotiables. The coffee that you use and the water that you use, which is your ratio, is one of them. Your grind size is another one. Your water temperature, in which it should be just below boiling. So essentially what extraction is the process that the water goes through to extract the dissolvable solids that are inside of this coffee bean. The hotter your water is, the faster the molecules are moving around in the water, and the more it bounces back and forth between the molecules in the coffee beans, therefore ending up in your cup. The V60 produces a much more clean cup. I'm not the biggest fan of sediment in my coffee like you would get in a French press, and that's why this is probably my favorite brewing method. The first thing that I'm gonna come up with here is the ratio. I like to do 1:16 ratio, which means that for every 1 gram of coffee, I have another 16 milliliters of water. So for example, a very simple recipe that I do all the time is 25 grams of coffee to 400 grams of water. So 25 times 16 equals 400. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. The first step is to weigh your coffee. It's very important that you have a scale of some sort. You can find a cheap one on Amazon. Weigh the coffee. The very next step in this process is to prime your brewing device. Now, I'm going to be rinsing this filter, which is also a good practice to get rid of the paper taste, but I'm also going to make sure that all of this stuff is hot and ready to go throughout the entire process. So I basically stick the filter in, and I kind of hold it down with my finger because if not, it'll come out. And then I'll go ahead and pour around the edges. Make sure it kind of sticks to the sides. And do that a couple more times. And everything will be nice and hot and ready to go. So the next step is grind your coffee. Your coffee can either be fine, which is what you would use for espresso, or it can be super coarse, which is what you would use for a French press. We want ours to be somewhere in between. Probably one of the greatest pleasures in life, period, is smelling coffee immediately after it's ground. For some reason in my brain, the dopamine levels are just skyrocketing. We've just ground our coffee. Our device is all primed and ready to go. We will discard of our wastewater. I always like to double check the weight that I have going in here just to make sure it's exact. When you put 25 grams of coffee through this grinder, there's a chance that some of those particles are sticking to the side or inside of a chamber. But you still want to have 25 grams in here. So I always grind like maybe 1 or 2 more grams of coffee than I need. And then I work up to the weight in the filter so I know it's exactly what I need for this brew. With the scale off, you can put your pour over device on and then turn it on. And most scales will have this automatically tare. But if not, you'll put your pour over device on it and press the tare button, which means to zero out the scale so that it's at 0 grams. And that way I can see that I'm putting 25 grams in here. Oh, right on the money. So making the bed of coffee level just by shaking it like this is the first step. Now, the actual first step in brewing this pour over is the good and faithful bloom. The bloom essentially means like a flower is blooming. Essentially your coffee will look the same. You're basically pouring just enough water to submerge the coffee so that the pores are open and ready for extraction. Now, I like to pour 3 times my coffee weight in first, so 75 grams of water or milliliters of water is what I'm going to pour for my bloom, and I'm going to wait 30 seconds before I resume my pour. Not all coffees are the same. After tasting this, I may decide that my grind size was off, and it's all really a game of trial and error. There are so many different variables that can affect how your brew is going to taste. If you don't like it, figure out what's wrong, and hopefully the tips that I'm going to give you will help you fix it a little bit. So the bloom, I'm going to start my timer when I start pouring. And then I'm going to pour in concentric circles. I like to start from the outside going in, and then cover the entire bed of coffee until I reach 3 times the input weight, and then I wait. This is also a good time to smell the aromas that are coming from the coffee. Absolutely delicious. So after 30 seconds of the bloom, I will start my second pour. And I also like to start in the center, and then I go around to the edges. And the more water you pour in your second pour, the more acids will be present in your cup. Timing is very important. If your brew is too long, your coffee will be bitter, astringent, and will taste dry, and maybe sour. So those are the things that you want to avoid, and it's basically like playing the game of extraction right up until that point, because you want all of the other good stuff in there. Another technique that I use in this pour, I do what I call the curly Q pattern, which means I make little circles with the water essentially around the edges of the pour over device, because one thing you want to avoid is pouring directly onto the filter, because if you pour onto the filter, the water is likely to go in between the wall and the pour over device and just straight into your cup and not extract much coffee. So on my final pour, I will pour in circles and get up to my weight slowly with a very slow pour in the center of the pour over. And then I'm done pouring. I'm also done weighing, so that doesn't matter anymore. And to preserve the life of the scale, I'm going to remove it. So another trick to do, in order to extract coffee the entire time, I always swirl the water that's inside of the pour over to make sure that all of the grinds that are stuck to the side of the walls kind of fall down. And to get gravity to do its job, I also give it a tap or two. And usually you only have to do that once, and you'll wind up with a flat bed as the finish and no coffee on the sides. With a smaller cup of coffee, and especially a light roast, you do not want to exceed maybe 2.5 to 3 minutes as the length of your brew. And some of the larger pour over devices like a Chemex, I wouldn't go more than maybe 5 or 6 minutes in your brew. So dial in your grind size so that you achieve that. Another thing to look out for is if your grind size is too fine, the bed of your coffee in the end will look like silky, filmy, and muddy. And that means that you have too many fines that have just basically settled on top. But when you see your bed, but you don't see any of that silky, smooth, muddy substance, you know you've done a pretty good job, or you're at least on your way. Once my pour over is finished, even if there's still some drips happening, I pull it at the time that I want it to end, so it doesn't keep extracting into my cup. And there you go. There you have it. And the final and most important step is to pour a cup for you and a friend, because community happens over coffee. If you're interested in this Honduras natural, you can go to our website, whitehart.cafe, and Hart is spelled H-A-R-T. You can find all of our coffees on there. You can sign up for a subscription, which means you can get coffee delivered to your door every month. You can keep up to date with what's going on here at the White Hart on our social media, Facebook page, Instagram, This has been Coffee with Coco, and thanks for watching.